Let's look at creating an autumnal fantasy image from this lovely picture I did of these two best friends. Join me as I go through Photoshop, and I'm going to just create as I go along, as usual. No scripts, no idea what I'm doing. We're just going to create, see what we want to do, and see what we want to create as we go along, as I did in the shoot. I just threw it together. So let's get started. Now, first thing we're going to do is any kind of cleanup. That's always my first job. So I'm going to grab my patch tool and go around and see if there's anything we want to do. Now I've got the girls laying on the floor, so heads up, laying on the floor. So things like veins and things, as you can see here, is quite common for anyone. If you lay on the floor, I get a nice big one in the middle of my forehead. So it's just where the blood's rushing to the head. So I'm just going to use my patch tool to move that around to remove the veins. And there's just a few little bits of flake here and a few little bits around there. Nothing really to do. As you can see, these girls have absolutely beautiful skin. There is nothing that really needs doing on their skin. I might smooth out a few little texture areas like I've just done with the veins. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a secondary layer using Control J, which, as you can see, has created a secondary layer down here. I'm going to click 5, which puts it on 50% opacity, which now means anything I move is only half going to be there. Obviously, we're not going to do that with an eye. So what we're going to do is generate just over the skin, just following the line of the skin. And what this does is it just ever so slightly softens the skin, but keeps that little bit of texture that's there. It's a really quick, easy kind of edit to just soften out little areas. If you don't want to do a full fashion kind of skin edit, I find I do it a lot around the lip and around the mouth, where there's just caught little shadows from my lighting, just tiny little bits there, and it just softens. So if I turn that off and on, you can see it's done nothing much but softened, and overall that's perfect on there. Now, before we do any more art, we've got a little bit of dry lip over here. So I'm going to do another 50% layer, Control J, hit 5, and I'm just going to soften along the lip, just along, just where that dryness is. And you'll see when I turn that off and on, it has just softened those bits out a little bit. I don't think there's anything particular to do. No, we're all good on there. Perfect. So before I move on to getting a bit creative with this, I'm thinking I'm going to do my contour, and then I'm ready to start playing with colours and get creative. So to do my contour, I'm going to do this on a grey layer. So I'm going to hit Control Shift and N. You've probably seen this in plenty of my other videos. We're going to hit Soft Light, tick box for a 50% grey layer, and we're then going to use Dodge and Burn to create the different highlights and contour that we want to create. So always, it's midtones at 20% on Dodge, midtones at 20% on Burn. So I always start with Dodge, do our highlights first, and I just use a brush, roughly the same size that you'd use if you were using a makeup brush on that part of the face, and just tapping away to just create that as if you were adding a powder. I'm then going to go onto my burn tool. Definitely don't want to brush that big. And we're going to just start drawing around the areas we want to just contour in. Just contour in here, over a little bit, just along the lines. This is all along the lighting that was naturally there. It would be a lot more difficult if these areas weren't already lit the way that I'm contouring them. So if the lighting was the other way up, this would be a lot harder to do. So all I'm doing is enhancing the lighting I already had. So if I turn that layer off and on, you can see it's made quite a difference. We've got quite a nice impact from that contour, and I am happy with that to move on. Now I want to start playing with my colours. I'm going to add a bit of an overlay, a few effects, but I'm actually, first thing I want to do is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to hit selective colour, and I'm going to play with my adjustments tab that comes up. I want to play with the greens. Now, because this is on a mask, anything that does affect the skin, I can pull out later, and that's not a problem. So you can see I've got some reds here. If I start playing with this, it is also going to affect the skin as well as those leaves. So if I did want to affect them, it's not a problem. I can pull that back. I'm going to go to my greens. I'm going to start playing and seeing, okay, is that affecting those down there? I want more of an autumnal, quite a warm tone. I think that's the vibe for this image. I only had like the greeny kind of leaves at the time, but if I start playing with these, oh, there we go, that's nice. That's got that nice kind of rich green. Pull it into here. And just literally play around until you like it. The beauty of stuff like this is it can trick us into an image you think is red actually has a lot of purples in it, and so it can be quite tricky to pinpoint exactly what it is. So by just playing around, seeing what it does, that works quite well. I mean, if I turn that off and on, that's already done quite a good job. The next thing I'm going to do, because I want to affect a few more of my leaves, I'm going to create a completely blank layer and play with my hue. So Control, Shift and N for my blank layer. I'm then going to get a brush, normal brush, and grab one of the colours I like. I quite like that tone. And I'm going to just paint it over here. Now, I've got to be careful not to hit the skin. But if I change this layer now to hue, everything that I paint with that brush is going to have that kind of tone to it. Now I can turn this down with my opacity. I could also do a mask. I could turn this leaf onto that colour if I wanted to. And just by playing around with that, we can create a consistent sort of tone throughout all the leaves. I'm quite liking this. I'm being quite soft with what I'm doing with my brush, so it's not affecting their skin too much. If I turn that off and on, huge difference. Now, if I keep this and hit Control U, now play with my hue, you will see all of the bits that I coloured now changing around and playing. Now, I don't want them to go blue, of course, that would be rubbish. But I might want to warm it up a slight bit. I might want to play around a little bit more with that if I chose to. But I quite like that that's given me a nice autumnal green, slight rusty kind of colour to that now. I think that looks quite nice. Now, lastly, I want to put a bit of a softening effect over the leaves here. So I'm going to go back down to my background layer, Control J. We're going to go up to filter, we're going to go to blur, and we're going to go to, it's either Gaussian or motion. I'm going to go Gaussian blur. It's always a classic. And I want it just ever so slightly soft, just so I can't see the detail. And I'm going to add a mask, Control I to invert that mask, turning it off. And now I can draw wherever I want my blur. Now, obviously that's going to look silly, just having the odd blur. So we're going to turn the opacity down to about 30%, 20%. When you turn this off and on, what you'll see is it's just added ever so slight motion blur, ever so slight Gaussian blur to the leaves, which has just created a slightly more soft effect around our subject. And I think we're not distracted by that texture like we was before. It's pulling it into the right place there. So overall, I'm loving that. I think that looks really, really nice. I'm going to go back onto my contour layer because this leaf here is bugging me. And I'm just going to tone it down a little bit by using my burn. I'm going to do the same down here. It's totally okay to go back and correct things. If you've seen some of my other videos, you might know that occasionally I'm known for flattening layers. But I know when I want to go back and I want to make changes, and when I'm quite happy to commit, and I will flatten my layers down. I don't see the point of keeping tiffs that are humongous. I already have enough space issues as it is. So I think that looks really, really nice. I love that. Now, something I wanted to try was to have a slight falling leaf effect on top of this image. Now, I generated a image on ChatGPT of falling leaves. Now, this is rubbish. This is not going to do me any good here whatsoever. But if I just put this in the middle, I want these leaves to look like they're falling. So actually, all I really needed was a black background and the colour. And I'll show you why. I'm going to just unrasterize that layer, hit Control L and make sure I've got pure shadows, which I do. Perfect. So that means I can now turn this onto screen or lighten. So lighten's going to be better. and all the black area has become see-through essentially. So I can just see those leaves falling around. Now I'm going to go onto filter and I'm going to go Gaussian blur. So blur, Gaussian blur, and I can now choose how out of focus I want these leaves to be. So I think that's working quite well for me. Just about there's good. I'm going to click OK. Now the last thing is they're quite orange and they're not really working color-wise. So I'm going to go Control U onto my hue again and pick the kind of tonal range, a bit more yellow, and I'm going to pull the saturation down as well. Perfect. Now playing with my opacity, let's have a look there. Brilliant. That's just adding that effect. So you've got a much more believable effect that there are leaves kind of falling onto them now, and it's a much more ethereal kind of feel. This might not be your cup of tea. That's totally fine. It's something I thought I wanted to add. I wanted a little bit more movement into the image. We're still very much drawn to their faces. I'm really, really happy with that. Let's have a look at our before and after, shall we? So there's our original image. I had a load of leaves lying around the studio from another shoot, so I thought, well, let's use them, and I can always tweak colouring if I want to. And that's what we've come up with. That's our final image there. And I'm really happy with that. I think that looks lovely. So brilliant. Thanks for joining me. I will show you the before and after of what we've done here. And remember to, if you've enjoyed this video and you're still here after 10 minutes, please hit that subscribe button. Every little helps. At least hit the like button. A good thumbs up helps the algorithm. And I will be back with more edits very, very soon.